This is The Bottom Line. The Bottom Line on 938 Live.
Analysts say, barring any global economic uncertainties, it's likely that conditions in Singapore's property market next year will not differ much from this year's. For 938 Live's The Year Ender series, our reporter Gwendolyn Goh spoke with analysts and files this report.
Property data from the Urban Redevelopment Authority, or URA, for the first 9 months of this year triggered a mixed bag of emotions for buyers and sellers. That's because prices of private homes for the period dropped by 3% year-on-year. That's good news for buyers, but certainly not for sellers. Sellers also had to contend with the falling demand of private homes in the same period, as on-year transaction volume slumped by more than half. Senior Director at Savills Singapore, Alan Cheong, says the falling prices and demand goes hand in hand.
When we look at the market where the number of transactions are relatively low, the ability of the market to be able to support higher prices is lacking. And so we see that drag down of the price index by about 3 to 4%, maybe for the full year on year.
But though prices have gone down, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, said in October that the government is not about to relax the cooling measures just yet.
The measures are also playing a healthy role in cooling the property market. We can never get rid of cycles in the property market, where you have upswings in some years, followed by a correction subsequently. If we do not get a meaningful reversal after each upswing, property prices will run ahead of the growth of household incomes in the long term, and that we must avoid. We have seen some correction in both private property prices and HDB resale prices over the last 4 to 5 quarters, but there's some distance to go in achieving a meaningful correction after the sharp run-up in prices in recent years.
To this end, the Monetary Authority of Singapore said in its annual financial stability review released last month that property prices remain elevated. The central bank noted that since 2009, prices have gone up by 60%, but they've only fallen by 4% to date. Still, Chief Executive of Century 21, Khoo Swee Yong, hopes that restrictions such as the Total Debt Servicing Ratio, or TDSR, can be reviewed for certain groups of buyers.
Home buyers who are not speculators, there is space to change some of these cooling measures, but I don't think the government would relax the cooling measures in order to allow any more speculative investors into the market. So that is not so good news for pushing asset values upwards.
On the demand front, developers only sold about 5,900 units for the period ended September, less than half of what was sold the year before. Notwithstanding, Mr. Cheong from Savills says there were projects that managed to draw in the crowd this year.
Their prices were below $1,000 per square feet on average for the first launch, and we are referring to developments like Coco Palm. So the sweet spot is in this kind of price range. And then there are also projects that did well because their perception is that they are getting value for money by the buyers. Buyers tend to be very price sensitive compared to pre-TDSR days.
Going forward, both analysts agree that property developers will reduce launches next year. That's because the government has cut supply in its Government Land Sales Program, or GLS, for the first half of next year. The 6 confirmed sites on the GLS for the period ended June next year can yield about 3,000 private homes. That's 23% lower in supply from the GLS released for the second half of this year. However, analysts do not expect insufficient supply, as they say there's still an unsold inventory in the current housing market for buyers to look to. URA will release final full-year figures for the private residential market in January next year.
Gwendolyn Goh on The Bottom Line right here on 938 Live.